As you may have caught on by now, throughout the month of Elul, the Beth Am rabbis are exploring some of the central prayers of the High Holy Days as part of our own spiritual preparation leading up to the days of awe. But before I dive into it, if you're in fourth grade, you're going to go with your teachers, Jeff and Susie, into room 8. 9? Room 9. Over that way. Just during the sermon, you'll come back in a few minutes-ish. So as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about this evening, since I usually get to speak on Rosh Hashanah, I don't often get to spend as much time on the liturgy of Yom Kippur. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to look at the text of Kol Nidre, which kicks off Yom Kippur and is seen as so central to the Erev Yom Kippur service that it's actually more commonly known just as Kol Nidre. It's probably one of the most familiar, but perhaps least understood texts of the High Holy Days. On the one hand, there is the power of the music and the moment it creates. The haunting melody, both ancient and familiar, seems to pull at something deep within our soul. The cantor's voice, sweet and longing, and a hint of that cry of chazanut, the power of the choir, the melancholy cello. There are stories of famous Jewish thinkers and philosophers like Edmund Flegg and Theodor Herzl and Franz Rosenzweig, who were on their way out of Judaism when some encounter with the sounds of Kol Nidre stirred something deep within them and brought them back to their faith. In 1927, it was the climax of the first talkie movie, The Jazz Singer, when Al Jolson, thankfully not in blackface in this moment, assumes his dying father's pulpit to sing these ancient words in an attempt to reconcile his relationship with his father at the end of his life. In 1980, Neil Diamond sang it in his version of The Jazz Singer. But then, on the other hand, the text of Kol Nidre, written mainly in Aramaic, is not actually a prayer, but rather a carefully constructed legal formula. The opening words, Kol Nidre, all vows, introduce a lengthy declaration in which we declare that all of the vows and commitments and oaths and promises that we make to God in the coming year are hereby null and void. It parses out sacrifices and konam vows and konas vows and things that we consecrate as holy. It does not, in fact, touch upon our promises or vows or obligations that we've made to other people. This is purely spiritual, and it speaks to a classical rabbinic concern over the dangers of making promises to the divine that we might not be able to keep, and the spiritual implications of doing so. Some Orthodox Jews still take this idea of the danger of making vows so seriously that they'll often add the phrase bli neder, meaning essentially without promising, as in, I'll see you next Tuesday, bli neder. The misinterpretation of Kol Nidre has long been a source of both confusion among Jews, as well as a common anti-Semitic trope that Jews were untrustworthy, since we preemptively annulled any of our vows or promises each year. But in its context, Kol Nidre focuses only on spiritual vows, not our obligations to each other. Most traditionally, Kol Nidre is sung before sundown on the eve of Yom Kippur. It's one final bit of business we attend to before entering into the sacred time of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, also known as Shabbat Shabbaton, the Shabbat of Shabbats. Part of the reason we have our past presidents here at Beth Am, the leaders of our congregation, up on the bima holding Torah scrolls, is that they represent a Beit Din, a court of Jewish leaders who are official witnesses for all of us as we recite the legal formula of Kol Nidre. On Yom Kippur, the imagery of the empty ark, of wearing a talit and white clothing, is meant to force us to come face to face with our own death, to ponder our own mortality. In many ways, it sets the tone as we enter a day of serious contemplation of our missteps of the past year, of asking for forgiveness for things we may have done wrong, and with trepidation, take the first steps into the early moments and possibilities of a new year. Kol Nidre has three distinct movements. First, we remind ourselves of our capacity for good and righteousness. We open with the words from Psalm 97, Or zarua la tzadik yishrelev simcha. Light is sown for the righteous, radiance and joy from the pure of heart. And we ask for permission, both from God and from each other, to pray in a community with avarianim. We are the avarianim, those who have transgressed and missed the mark. This is an admission in part that despite our best efforts, all of us are bound to have made some mistakes. None of us are without flaws. Then come the words of Kol Nidre, traditionally repeated 3 times, gaining in volume and intensity each time. At Beth Am, we often begin with Donna Rudin on the cello, followed by the cantor and the choir. And finally, we follow up Kol Nidre and close with a series of biblical citations, recalling moments in which God has forgiven the Israelites, setting the stage for our own ability to find forgiveness over the coming day of atonement. It's not entirely clear when exactly the text of Kol Nidre was written, or when it became associated with Yom Kippur. Some scholars believe that it may date as far back as the Babylonian Jewish communities of the 6th and 7th centuries, given some of its similarities to some of the wording in legal contracts of the time. Some think it may have been composed during the reign of a 6th century Visigoth king of Spain who ordered Jews to convert or die. As Rabbi Alan Liu writes, Kol Nidre may have originally been a cry of pain, an expression of overwhelming grief at having had to convert against their will. Spanish Jews may have chanted it when they gathered secretly to observe Yom Kippur. Perhaps they did the same later under the Byzantine persecution of the 9th century, and again under the Papal and Spanish Inquisitions of the 13th and 15th centuries. Rabbi Liu and others admit that these are really only theories and folklore, as there is no solid historical corroboration. In any case, we do see Kol Nidre present in manuscripts of the Mahzor Vitri, the French High Holy Day prayer book dating all the way back to the 12th century. More recently, Kol Nidre has had a more complicated history in our Reform movement. The early Reformers rejected the legalistic implications and the unseemly lack of trustworthiness they saw in this text. Early Reform prayer books omitted the text of Kol Nidre, but the music and the emotions that it stirred helped maintain its sense of importance even among Reform Jews. Indeed, the melody is considered a Misinai tune, one from Mount Sinai, one that has been ubiquitous, at least among Ashkenazi Jews of Eastern European descent, reaching so far back into our history that we're not really sure when or where it came from. When I took a class on the High Holy Day Machzor during rabbinical school, my teacher, Rabbi Richard Levy, taught us that there is a desire in all of us to make promises, that the forces that lead us to make promises are exactly the ones that prevent us from fulfilling them. One of the important lessons of Kol Nidre is that we should be very careful with when and how and if we make promises, as we don't always know if we'll be able to keep them. So in that spirit, when I met with our Sunday program 4th graders last week and taught them a little bit about this prayer, I asked them to write down a hope for this coming year, rather than making any promises. Some of them were very specific. I hope that I get a Julio Rodriguez rookie card and a Josh Allen autograph. I hope I get a Ronnie Lott and Jerry Rice card signed. Interesting wishes, right? Some were about setting a goal. I hope that I read more books this year. I hope I try my best at everything and grow and learn from failure. I hope I have fun in school this year, ride more roller coasters, win a prize, do well in school, learn some new stories, get to know my classmates, and to maybe make some new friends. Some were about a desire to change a behavior or an attitude, or a more general hope for health and well-being. I hope that I won't get mad as much and kick things anymore. I hope that I will be nice to my family. I hope that my family and I are safe and happy. I hope this is a year of good health. So what are your hopes for the coming year? On your way home tonight, consider sharing them with someone you trust, or write them down and check in on them periodically throughout the year. As we approach the High Holy Days and the words and melodies of Kol Nidre call out to us again, may we remember that our words and our actions matter, and may we use them with care and intention. Shabbat Shalom. We will continue our service.